What if the person you trust most is psychologically wired to seek connection everywhere except with you? The disturbing truth about how avoidants manage multiple relationships simultaneously reveals a level of emotional compartmentalization that most people can't even comprehend. They use multiple partners as emotional insurance policies. Avoidant individuals maintain connections with multiple people as a sophisticated psychological defense mechanism against the terror of complete emotional dependence on one person. Their nervous system cannot tolerate the vulnerability that comes with placing all their emotional needs in a single relationship, so they create elaborate networks of partial connections that collectively provide what they cannot risk seeking from one partner. Each person in their network serves a specific emotional function while remaining safely at arm's length from their core vulnerabilities. Their brain treats these multiple connections like diversified emotional investments, ensuring that no single person gains enough power to trigger their deepest abandonment fears. They carefully ration different aspects of themselves across various relationships, never revealing their complete emotional landscape to any one individual. This compartmentalization allows them to maintain the illusion of intimacy while avoiding the terrifying possibility of being fully known and potentially rejected by someone who matters completely. The avoidant mind justifies these multiple connections as necessary for emotional stability rather than recognizing them as betrayals of trust or commitments. They convince themselves that their primary partner cannot possibly meet all their needs, using this rationalization to maintain emotional connections that would devastate their partner if discovered. Their nervous system craves the safety that comes from knowing they have backup sources of validation, attention, and emotional regulation. These emotional insurance policies operate on varying levels of intensity and involvement, from seemingly innocent friendships that carry romantic undertones to full-blown emotional affairs that provide the intimacy they cannot access in their primary relationship. The avoidant individual manages these connections with calculated precision, ensuring that each person receives just enough attention to maintain their interest, while never demanding the kind of emotional commitment that would trigger their flight response. They master the art of emotional compartmentalization and segmentation. Avoidant individuals develop sophisticated psychological mechanisms that allow them to maintain completely separate emotional realities with different partners without experiencing internal conflict or guilt. Their nervous system learns to create distinct mental compartments where different relationships exist independently, preventing the cognitive dissonance that would overwhelm most people attempting to juggle multiple emotional commitments. This compartmentalization becomes so advanced that they can genuinely experience authentic emotions with each person while maintaining complete emotional separation between connections. Their brain processes each relationship as existing in its own universe, complete with unique communication styles, emotional expressions, and levels of intimacy that remain hermetically sealed from their other connections. They develop different personas for different relationships, allowing them to be vulnerable with one person while remaining guarded with another, or passionate with someone new while being distant with their long-term partner. This psychological flexibility feels natural to their nervous system, which has always struggled with the consistency that healthy relationships require. The avoidant mind becomes expert at managing the logistical and emotional complexities of multiple relationships through sophisticated organizational systems and emotional regulation techniques. They learn to switch between different emotional states rapidly, accessing the specific feelings and responses that each relationship requires without contamination from their other connections. This ability to compartmentalize extends to their memory systems, allowing them to maintain detailed awareness of each person's needs, preferences, and emotional patterns without confusion or overlap. Their compartmentalization skills enable them to experience genuine emotions and connections with multiple people simultaneously without feeling conflicted about the inherent contradictions in their behavior. They can love their primary partner while also developing deep feelings for others, experiencing each emotion as authentic and valid within its specific compartment. This psychological architecture allows them to maintain multiple relationships indefinitely without the internal pressure that would force most people to choose or integrate their emotional lives. They exploit their partner's trust through strategic emotional availability. Avoidant individuals become masters at providing just enough emotional availability to each partner to maintain their trust and investment while carefully withholding the deeper intimacy that would create genuine vulnerability or accountability. They learn to read each person's emotional needs with precision, offering calculated doses of attention, affection, and connection that keep their partner satisfied without requiring genuine emotional risk on their part. This strategic emotional availability becomes a manipulation tool that allows them to maintain multiple relationships without detection or confrontation. Their nervous system develops sophisticated mechanisms for providing different types and levels of emotional connection to different people based on what each partner will accept and what serves their own emotional regulation needs. They become chameleons who can mirror their partner's attachment styles and emotional patterns, providing anxious partners with intermittent validation while offering other avoidants the respectful distance they crave. This adaptability allows them to maintain multiple relationships that feel satisfying to each partner while remaining emotionally protected. The avoidant individual learns to use their partner's trust against them by presenting themselves as fundamentally honest and trustworthy while carefully concealing the extent of their other emotional commitments. They exploit their partner's secure attachment assumptions about monogamy and emotional exclusivity, using these expectations as cover for their multiple relationship maintenance. Their partner's trust becomes the very thing that enables their emotional infidelity to continue undetected. They develop sophisticated justification systems that reframe their emotional availability to multiple partners as kindness, friendship, or professional necessity, rather than recognizing it as a betrayal of their primary relationship's emotional boundaries. Their nervous system becomes expert at managing the guilt and cognitive dissonance that would typically prevent such behavior, allowing them to maintain their self-image as a good person while engaging in fundamentally deceptive relationship practices. They create backup plans that destroy primary relationships. Avoidant individuals unconsciously sabotage their primary relationships by maintaining alternative connections that provide escape routes when intimacy becomes too threatening or demanding. Their nervous system cannot tolerate the complete vulnerability that committed relationships require. So they create safety nets that allow them to avoid facing their deepest fears about love and abandonment. These backup relationships become psychological escape hatches that prevent them from ever fully investing in their primary partnership, ensuring that the relationship remains limited and ultimately unfulfilling. Their brain treats these alternative connections as insurance against the possibility that their primary relationship might become too emotionally demanding or that their partner might leave them. The mere existence of these backup options changes how they approach conflict, intimacy, and commitment in their primary relationship, making them less willing to work through difficulties or invest in long-term growth. They approach their primary partnership with one foot always positioned toward the exit, preventing the kind of all-in commitment that secure relationships require. The avoidant mind uses these backup relationships to regulate their emotional distance from their primary partner, unconsciously withdrawing from their main relationship, when alternative connections provide the emotional stimulation or validation they crave. This dynamic creates a competitive environment where their primary partner is unknowingly competing with other connections for the avoidant's emotional attention and investment. The primary relationship becomes one option among many, rather than the central focus of their emotional life. These backup plans become self fulfilling prophecies that guarantee the failure of their primary relationships, as their divided emotional attention and investment make it impossible for their main partnership to develop the depth and security that lasting love requires. Their partners eventually sense the emotional competition and divided loyalty, even when they cannot identify its source, leading to increasing conflict and dissatisfaction that drives the avoidant further toward their alternative connections. They justify their behavior through distorted relationship philosophy. Avoidant individuals develop elaborate philosophical frameworks that redefine fidelity, commitment, and emotional exclusivity in ways that justify their multiple relationship maintenance while preserving their self image as ethical and loving people. Their nervous system requires these mental gymnastics to avoid the overwhelming guilt and self confrontation that would result from acknowledging the harmful nature of their behavior. They convince themselves that traditional relationship expectations are unrealistic, possessive, or emotionally immature. Using these beliefs to rationalize their need for multiple emotional connections. Their brain creates sophisticated arguments about human nature, emotional needs, and relationship structures that make their behavior seem enlightened rather than deceptive. They may embrace philosophies about polyamory, emotional freedom, or the impossibility of one person meeting all their needs, using these concepts to justify behavior that their partners never consented to or agreed upon. These philosophical positions become defensive armor that protects them from examining the real motivations behind their multiple relationship maintenance. The avoidant mind reframes their inability to commit fully to one person as evidence of their emotional sophistication and realistic understanding of human nature, rather than recognizing it as evidence of their own attachment injuries and fear of vulnerability. They convince themselves that their partners are naive or codependent for expecting emotional exclusivity, using this judgment to avoid confronting their own limitations and fears about intimate relationships. Their distorted relationship philosophy allows them to maintain their behavior indefinitely while feeling justified and even superior to people who choose monogamous commitment. They view their multiple connections as evidence of their emotional capacity and social skills rather than recognizing them as avoidance mechanisms that prevent genuine intimacy and growth. This philosophical framework becomes so embedded in their identity that changing their behavior would require dismantling their entire worldview about love, commitment, and human relationships.